The reason why I don't record our hangouts is because I just want it to be like a bunch of guys sitting in a room saying whatever the hell we want. There's nobody, recording anything. This is more of kind of like a learning conversation. So I figure it's better to record it.
Yeah, so the locker room talk can't come and get you when you run for president.
Right. You never know what happens if you said something about grabbing somebody by the genitalia, right?
Or maybe the nuances of consent when you're already a star, right?
Never know what could go down. All right, gentlemen. It's the Sapiens.
I think somebody has a lot of sound in the background.
Yeah, somebody's playing something in the background. Who is that? There we go. Killed it. So, book club, man. I've never really done a book club. I dated a girl for about 3 years, single mommy, that was part of a book club. And that was interesting because the stories you'd hear about women in book clubs is just fucking retarded. But here we are, gentlemen. Here we are.
Yeah, do we need scotch for hours if they're all going to get drunk on wine during their sessions?
I don't know. I got my tea going, so I'm ready to go, man. Where do you guys want to start? I thought it was a pretty interesting listen because it really connected some. What my biggest takeaway is? Why don't we start with that? How human beings are so hardwired and programmed to gossip and share common beliefs, like political beliefs, religious beliefs. Even the idea of money is completely manufactured because we all agree that $1 has $1 in value, and you can buy certain things that have some value to that. How about that? Like, to me, that was like a
Yeah, I was actually talking to some of my clients about that the other day, and some were receptive, and some just said it made my head hurt and I should shut up. But I was talking about how...
Well, the sheep don't really want to know why things are the way they are, right? The sheep just want to be sheep.
Yeah, because that's what I started bringing up was like, have you ever noticed that basketball, because that's the example he uses in the beginning, the basketball is just a shared delusion. Like the idea of basketball, it doesn't exist materially, but we all universally accept that it's real when it isn't. Sure, there's a hoop and there's a ball, but all the rules are completely part of our shared imagination.
Right. Yeah, it's because we all agree on that set of rules. But I mean,
basketball is a funny example because, like, for any game we have, like, the value of a game is kind of explicitly on the rule set itself, right? It's like it's only fun if we can manipulate or act within the certain constraint. And like that's how they're programming video games, to take control of kids' heads, to like figure out the exact parameters for that.
Have you guys, actually, since you mentioned that, have you read or listened to, I think it's called Triggers or Triggered by Nir Eyal?
No.
I don't think I've heard of that.
This would actually be a really good follow-up book, and I'd almost be willing to listen to it again because I found it good. It's called Hooked: How to Build Habit-Forming Products, and it gets into what you were just talking about there, about how we all subscribe to certain beliefs universally, but it also tells you why you get hooked on certain things, like why Facebook notifications work and why World of Warcraft, hooked people to the game because it would get them up, certain levels of achievement, and those little dopamine shots that we get from all that. But it's probably a pretty interesting follow. But back to Sapiens, I mean, who else had like big ass takeaways like that?
Well, I think one of the takeaways I got from it kind of ties back into 12 Rules for Life. Like, no matter what, we've always had hierarchies. There's always been someone at the bottom, someone at the top, someone making all the grain, cooking the bread, and some ruler telling who's going to do it. And I guess my takeaway from it is, where do I want to be in that hierarchy? Yeah. Do I want to be the guy making the bread, or do I want to be the king telling them to make the bread?
Yeah. So what did you decide?
I don't want to be the guy making the bread.
Yeah.
Well, the irony inside of that is that the hierarchy itself is constructed by whatever fiction we all collectively hold on to, right? Yeah. So like, if you're breaking the rules of like the agreed fiction to try to supersede the hierarchy, they kill you for stepping out of boundaries, right? Unless you do it like cleverly in the right way. So like what we're in the middle of is almost this like crusade of whose false reality is the thing we're all going to agree to, which is kind of what red pill versus feminism entirely is in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, like the more that I start start going through these types of books and these Evo psych stories, it's like you start to realize how fucked we really are.
This is the highest accomplishment of humans, like the ability to create fiction. Like
we've really manufactured quite the world for ourselves as sapiens, haven't we?
Well, look, here's another mind-blowing example from the book. Like every single society that has existed through till today has oppressed or destroyed another society, or oppressed or destroyed their environment around them, or both.
Right.
It's like, I mean, the Aborigines in 1,000 years killed off every single land animal over 100 pounds within 1,000 years of landing on the continent.
Yeah, that was in Australia.
And humans invented slash and burn the moment we harnessed fire. How fucked is that?
Yeah, and it's almost like we're turning into these like sub factions now. It's like, how the Neanderthals got wiped out by the Sapiens. It's like, I wonder what's going to happen between like the left and the right, and political divides, and even religion and belief systems like red pill versus blue pill, and feminism versus masculinity, right? Like, do we start to subdivide into these factions?
Just intermate.
Yeah, we're in it. Like that's what the world is.
Matrix. I mean, there's no doubt we're in the Matrix.
I think the question, though, is: are we going to solve those problems the same way that the humans solve the problem of having to coexist with the Denisovians, Homo erectus, and Neanderthals? I would hope not.
I don't know, man. I think Aaron Cleary is right. We are a vile species that's just like on the planet.
Well, the funny thing,
you can look at it as vile, but if any other species have the same abilities, would they not do the same thing? Like if some alligator or some reptile was as intelligent, would they have any mercy on us? I don't think they would.
I don't think that there's any living being on this planet that's shaped the Earth the way that we have. I mean, whales are the biggest mammal, right? It's the biggest mammal, but they don't.
Yeah, aquatic mammals, I think, are rated the next most intelligent from human.
Dolphins, yeah.
Actually, I think the octopus is rated a little bit higher.
Is it?
Yeah, they have severe problem-solving abilities. Like, and plus they're invertebrates; they can get through like a quarter-size hole just by getting their beak through. And
they're also very deceptive.
Yeah, the beak is the only thing that doesn't move. Yeah.
Octopus are also very deceptive. Like they'll trick animals into scenarios so they can prey on them. Like even the female octopus has been known to, if she's hungry, will pretend to want to mate with a male octopus. Like, send all the choosing signals and then smoke his ass and just eat him.
You see, that's why they're not as smart as us, because if it was a human, she would find a way to get him constantly providing food instead of just biting his arm off.
Exactly.
She just,
long-term strategies,
divorce rape the octopus and take a limb every year.
You see, divorce is being able to see ahead into the future and maximize the output rather than just biting the hand immediately.
Correct. What did you think of the book, Paul?
Well, I enjoyed it. I was kind of audio booking it in between a lot of other activities, so I didn't dive into it in the most scholarly fashion as possible. I did notice like some things where I was like, what the fuck did he just say? You know what I mean? Like a couple of things that made me kind of go, well, I don't know about that. Like, all right, so starting with the idea that there's a little bit of the noble savage myth going on, like, for example, like this idea that, well, we were really worse off with agriculture, you know what I mean? Because people had to work harder and had less nutritious diets. I don't know that I agree with that. I don't think that that's 100% true, because what it actually allowed for was more of a class system on a broader scale. It doesn't talk about that, so it allowed us to enslave a whole group of people to provide for a different groups of people in higher classes. So your higher classes weren't the ones with less nutritious of a diet, you know what I mean? And less, it was the lower classes who were enslaved actually working on the farms and doing the agriculture that allowed for it. So
what about the economic
that's really
system
what
of
happened with
capitalism?
That. And they didn't mention much about that. That was one thing that, there's a whole bunch of things. Like,
what about the whole, like capitalism being like the destruction of the sapiens world. Like, we can't leave capitalism, basically. It's gotta, like, you can't go from capitalism to socialism. It doesn't work. Socialism doesn't work. It's proven not to work. But capitalism as a system is still flawed, which is well, like, it's got to implode. You know, it's kind of like we can't get away from agriculture now.
Right. Well, and the thing about you could tell there's a little bit of more of a liberal leaning, to put it into a political context, a little bit of a liberal leaning. I mean, I thought he was very objective, and I really liked the book, so I'm not just slamming on him, but I thought there was a little bit of a liberal leaning, academia mindset with some of it, like his approach to money and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I realize that credit and money is kind of illusionary, but what it is it was a way for us to represent perceived value and exchange perceived value, you know? So if I'm a laborer, there's a perceived value for my labor that adds up to a thing, and then I use that thing to buy other things that are of other perceived values. And that perceived value is the illusion part, but that does point to an objective actual value. Like food actually has value, you know? The smartphone that I have actually has some value to it. It's just the values that we put on it is where it's a little bit, you know what I mean? A little bit more in our imagination, as the author would say. But I think that capitalism is a good thing. And it seemed a little bit more of a negative kind of a connotation on it. And a little bit more positive too on.
Well, I think what he was driving at with capitalism is that the fiat currency system, like the monetary system that we use to store and exchange value right now, is completely flawed. And I mean, like, Bitcoin solves a lot of that. It's one of the reasons why I really like the technology and the blockchain.
Right.
I don't know, like, I've been thinking about it a lot the last week, and I even asked Amir today on the show, I'm like, do you think that leaning out 5, 10, 50 years that Bitcoin would actually replace fiat currency? And it seems like, as sapiens, we've always adapted and maneuvered through the landscape whenever we needed to for, whatever it would take to make it work. Like, I mean, there's one clear about sapiens is we know how to multiply. Like, we know how to multiply the fuck out of ourselves.
Yeah, well, and that's the one thing, a good positive thing from it, a really hard positive, was our use of our minds and imagination to create solutions to problems. We're a lot less violent and less, I mean, we can criticize our current society, but I would much rather be around now in some ways, than maybe 1,000 years ago, unless, of course, I was the sultan of some area 1,000 years ago. But you get what I'm saying? It's like, it was much more, we're able to solve a lot of problems with our imagination. So there's a lot less violence. Like, we can have this war, so to speak, against, the feminists and the red pill without killing each other, right? I mean, we can do that. We're capable of that. Where people would have just been slaughtered, you know what I mean, in other tribal times. And so that was a good thing. So I didn't look at it quite so much like we're fucked. I looked at it like, well, we have a savage past like any animal would have, but we're capable of using our minds and imagination to solve problems, I think.
Yeah.
That's an interesting point. I think I'm sorry to cut you off. I was just saying, I think the book was trying to avoid value judgments specifically in terms of which is more moral. Right?
He definitely did make a value judgment about the change from from foraging to agriculture. And I'm not sure how I feel about, like, I get what he was going at. I think the comparison he's going for is like when he talks about how chicken and poultry is like the most successful species in existence, but they have terrible lives. And he compares it, he says, we domesticated people. And there is truth to that, in that I guess if you do look at like the life of the average like forager, it was probably a lot more free willing, but at the same time, like, I don't know, there was a lot more risk in it. Like, there was no medicine, there was no doctor, there was a lot more risk of encounters with wild animals.
Well,
so
certain classes of people didn't have the ability to spend the time on researching medicine or research. So agriculture allowed us to come together more collectively, so other segments of society can work on the things that we now have. If we were all segmented into tribes now, you wouldn't have those things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
Or
segment
if you spent all
two.
your time making medicine, someone kills you and takes the medicine.
Right.
You spent all their time working
Yeah.
out.
Right.
What agriculture allowed us to do is to specialize into elite caste, into worker class, into ruler class. And I think the one thing about capitalism and isms in general is the best ism will always prevail, and we won't go back, either because we can't imagine life before it was, or because the ism just is better. Like, you can't go to any socialist country that's gone away from socialism and say, so would you like to go back? They'll all say no. And
it's so bizarre to me today that there's so many people that want socialism. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah.
It's like anybody that came from a socialist country to be like, why the hell would you want that shit, man? Like, I left that to come to North America.
Like, the fucking Berlin Wall was not built to keep capitalists out. It was to keep the fucking communists from leaving to capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I mean,
it's like,
the discussion is going to change in 20 years. They're going to have to build the wall to keep fuckers from leaving the United States if we become socialists to go somewhere else.
Oh my God.
You know,
it's funny
they'll be arguing for the wall for us.
yeah.
This is like what was it, Cloud Atlas, where like swapping.
You hear
pork.
about all these caravans, but it's like you don't see caravans going to Venezuela. They're coming from Venezuela.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you
Absolutely.
don't.
There's
China,
more refugees that have left Venezuela now than left Syria during the.
I mean, China doesn't have an immigration problem. I mean, it's funny because when you look at capitalism, there's no other system like in the history of man that's been tried that's lifted more people. Well, I would say that's enabled more people to lift themselves out of poverty while keeping their dignity, and you guys would love this guy named Dr. Thomas Sowell. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of him, but
He's great.
I love the way he compares capitalism to socialism. He says that capitalism is equality of opportunity, but it doesn't guarantee equality of outcome. He said socialism tries to guarantee the equality of outcome, and the outcome sucks for everybody. Like, the only way that you can make everybody equal is to bring all the successful people down to the level of the people that are not successful. Like, the have-nots cannot become haves through socialism because you can't tax a nation into wealth. You can't confiscate a nation into wealth.
Yeah, but then if the people get too self-conscious about the neighbor being so much better off.
Everybody else getting stats. Hang on a second. I'm just going to mute you, Maximus. There's something wrong with your audio.
Yeah, it was really staticky, hard to hear.
Yeah, it just went completely shit. So I just muted you there. So I'll just unmute you. Just hop in when you got it.
Is this any better?
There you go. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. If people become too self-conscious of the riches of their neighbor relative to themselves, then they want to kill the neighbor. It's like the same medicine model, right? And so, like, that's the difficulty of mass media, because capitalism has weirdly rewarded a sort of monopolized authoritarian, right? Like, so Google is like the only option. Amazon is the only realistic option, right? And so the people inside of there they now feel as if they're creating like government and feel afraid of people wanting to come like seize everything, right? So they're trying to be like the good guy inside of this like quasi new socialism that they're trying to push.
Well, but then when you look at all the good, that everybody does, it's like when you look at the good that Amazon does, when you look at the good, I mean, Amazon has revolutionized shopping, Apple revolutionized phones and music, and we can go on. And every time I find a killer product, I say to myself, man, I hope whoever invented this is a millionaire, because they would deserve every dime. And that's the key to wealth, is you bring value to people, to the masses at a low cost, a good product at a low cost. And I think they deserve it all. And
I completely agree with you. I think the problem more is this sort of infection of sort of like a myth of the greedy capitalist, right?
Yeah,
but
and that only survives when.
To play devil's advocate here, what do you think of Hagagi's his point that the biggest predictor of whether or not you're going to be wealthy or not is whether your parents were wealthy, and I think that's a big criticism that socialists do have of the system, that there is kind of an element of passing wealth down from generation to generation that doesn't seem fair or merited at all.
Not sure. Like Jordan Peterson cites that most fortunes disappear after 3 generations. So maybe we need to measure by grandfather instead of dad. But
he had on that, just because wealth does transfer hands, and usually you'll see that the kids of, and we're not talking like massive billionaires or something, but like I don't know, some oil prince over in Saudi Arabia necessarily, where the system allows for that family just to maintain that money. But we're talking in normal westernized culture, you'll see the wealth of that family erode, just like you said, a couple generations down the line, and then it kind of has to reset and sort of start over. And you see a lot of people in Western cultures, you know what I mean, that come up from nothing and start to be successful. So I don't know. I kind of challenge that. I haven't looked at numbers, but I know that there are numbers that challenge his assessment.
Did you guys find that it was interesting that Neanderthals have been around a hell of a lot longer than Sapiens, and we managed to wipe them out? And
I did.
If I remember, I think he also said that
one,
Neanderthals were physically superior,
right?
Like stronger and bigger.
But we work together better.
Yeah, that's not a surprise. Like orangutans don't even work out. They can like crush all of us in max lifts.
Yeah, and they're vegan too. They live on fruit and
check your arm out of your shot.
Always gonna bring up veganism.
Not fucking fair, man. Fucking monkeys that just crush us.
Well, I mean, there was a video that ended up on Joe Rogan clips where he was talking about his Fear Factor days when he had to hold like a little chimpanzee, and it wasn't even an adult. I think he said it was like a yearling, and he said it took a couple of swings at him, like hard hits, and he's like, those things are fucking powerful. Like you have no idea how strong monkeys are.
Yeah,
I know.
Their muscle is incredible. Well,
it's interesting because
that's what like this book does illustrate that our social abilities are the reasons why we've dominated, not so much our physical prowess. Physical prowess plays a role, but I mean it's our ability to socially come together. Yeah,
we basically socially outfuck our opponents.
Right.
I mean, no one human being could have taken down a mammoth. No one. It's more or less impossible. Even with a very sharp stick, there's no way you could do it. But you get a whole bunch of humans together to work together. Yeah, now you're talking.
Well, that's what the Sapiens did on the continent of Australia. They wiped out every animal that was over 100 pounds.
Because they had no defenses against humans either.
Yeah, and
tiny ones can kill you in one bite.
Right, and they didn't have any known way of dealing with humans because to them humans were brand new, right? Like they'd been on Australia for fucking hundreds of thousands of years, never met a human. All of a sudden, humans showed up. They had no response mechanism, so they all got wiped out in one generation. Like it's insane.
No animal has any defense against humans. I mean, look at it. We're running around trying to save species from extinction ourselves because. If we don't do it, like they'll be wiped out.
We don't even have defense against ourselves.
There's balances in nature too. I mean, I heard this homily one time where the guy was saying that think of the contrast between the development of different species. Like us humans, we're rational. We can build towers, we can build trains and iPhones and all these complex things. Yet it takes us, 6 months, 9 months to learn how to walk. We're weak. Whereas you look at a baby deer, that thing's up and walking in 2 days, but it's dumb. It's about as dumb as a rock.
Oh, it's not even 2 days. It's like within an hour of coming out.
Yeah, exactly.
But like humans are pretty defenseless up until like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Well, if you're a millennial,
you make the point in the book why that is. It's because our heads are so big that we can't get out of the birth canal as is. Like before modern medicine, like the infant mortality rate was just horrendous.
Right.
And if we stayed in any longer, like we would never get out at all. So it's a cost of being intelligent.
Yeah, and it's it's interesting. Like I was talking to this guy earlier today that spent over $100,000 on in vitro fertilization between him and his wife. Like that's a shitload of money to have a kid, right? And it's like they were just fucking away back in the day, and they would just take it as a lost. It's like 1 out of 4 would make it.
Well, that brings up an interesting point too, Richard, about how women in the society would. This would be pre-agriculture. They'd fuck every guy in the tribe because men weren't stupid. they know if you didn't fuck the girl, the kid wasn't yours. So they did the whole alpha fucks, get the good seed, then fuck the beta, so he'd help raise. The whole luteal, what's it called thing, right back into Rollo's Rational Male book.
Well, that is the literal theory of the bonobo, right? That you keep all the men happy if they all don't have confirmation of the paternity.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
That was really interesting to hear that kind of tie back into other books we have a group have read. So
yeah, it kind of ties in a bit to Sex at Dawn, because Chris Ryan was talking about how bonobos behave and the similarities between their behavior and human behavior, and how agriculture changed paternity for us. Basically, before that, women were just banging everything. It was alpha fucks, beta bucks, and the tribe would just kind of, like the village would raise the kids sort of thing. And then when we started plowing fields and having oxen and chicken and domesticating animals, it made sense to stay in one place and pass down our shit to our kids. So that's when paternity and marriage and monogamy sort of took hold. That was 10,000 years ago. But sapiens have been around for 70,000 years.
So that's the reason why I'm suspicious of the whole becoming an agriculturalist was bad for us argument, because if you look at it, it's kind of the dichotomy between a chimp society and a bonobo society. A chimp society is more violent, but at the same time it spreads out more and it's more powerful. And the other thing too is it's bad for men to live in a bonobo type society, because you end up getting guys who are investing their resources into progeny that aren't genetically theirs. Right. Whereas the more agriculturalist society,
well, they're too happy for more
assurance of paternity.
Well, bonobo society only works with a abundance of resources and no predators. That's the only reason that works. We're moving to more of a sexual environment of less rules now, because even the poorest person in a westernized culture, can get a phone from the government and $1 hamburger, right? Our level of scarcity isn't the way it was. And bonobos are in danger now of being extinct as other predators move in, and they're having to be, my understanding is they're having to be protected now. And so chimpanzees, because they evolved in a small little area where they didn't have predators for a very long time. And so when you had that and then this abundance of resources, there was no need for the males to have to fight off, you know what I mean? Other predators, other tribes, so to speak. So then you see this female-driven society.
And chimps have a wider range all over Africa. They're in a lot more places. And if you look at sapiens, that's more similar to us. I mean, look at us. We spread out over every continent. We're even on Antarctica, where theoretically life shouldn't be able to exist as we know it. It's just kind of absurd to say that we should be living in a bonobo type society.
Well, I think you're accurate in that our culture and social strength is better complemented through agrarian culture rather than just roving, following the herd. But he might be referring in the book to more physiological changes, in that the first traces of arthritis in fossil records come at the moment of agriculture. I'm on the carnivore diet right now, and my hair's coming back. Right on. It's so it might just be more specific technical to the body and adapting to permanent residence plants and raising the livestock from there, as opposed to the dangers of following the herd.
Well, a lot of those diseases and stuff happen as our life expectancy got longer. Sure. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
that too.
Started showing up, but we started living.
But can they actually tell how old
a dead thing is?
Like a 60,000-year-old skeleton of a sapien is? Because I'm told they measure it by molar impact, and I think I was told by the age of 35, molar impact has reached its maximum. So you can't really tell after 35 if somebody's 35 or 60.
Well, maybe it was just keto diet propaganda I was reading, but
I don't think that was mentioned in the book, but I read that somewhere else from a credible source. I can't remember what it is right now, so don't totally quote it. But yeah, it's interesting.
I think there are other ways they can do it. They can look at bones. There's pattern in the bone growth, and you can also look at the DNA. Every year, your telomeres, which are the ends of your DNA, get a little shorter. So if you have really short telomeres, that will indicate that you're older.
Got it. Okay.
I know there's ways I don't really know the specifics though.
You could probably tell from the back and the spine. Typically, even back then, odds are you're going to get a little bit hunched over as stooping, walking with a primordial stick, so to speak. You could probably tell that way too, just by, I'm sure the forensics people can figure that out. But I thought it was really interesting. Like, think about a modern bodybuilder. They're probably eating brown rice, chicken, broccoli or asparagus nonstop. But that's, the most optimized person is probably eating the same shit every single day. But back then, they're probably a hell of a lot stronger, a hell of a lot more nimble, and they're just eating such a huge variety of stuff. That makes me wonder if I've been doing meal prep and planning, and every other person's been doing it just completely wrong, that we just need so much more variety in our diets.
Well, there's one thing that's for sure, certain, they didn't have obesity 10,000 years ago.
You would have died.
Yeah,
that's also because you got to chase your steak. We don't have to do that
anymore. yeah. Here you just take it out of the freezer and throw it on the barbecue, right?
Yeah.
Back then, they might have tracked down an animal for a day if they were lucky to even catch anything.
It's that future planning that got us here.
They even mentioned the source of why we gorge on high calorie foods when presented, because that was a treat, and maybe gouging or gorging that one day might have extended our lifespan a month if we came across poor hunting for a couple weeks.
Yeah, well, if you didn't get to the figs on the tree, the bonobo chips would get to them first, right?
Right.
We ain't sharing with them.
No, not that. Humans don't like to share. We like to destroy.
That's why we can't have bonobo society, because we all have to share everybody else's girlfriend.
Yeah, it's weird though, because we're kind of heading that way where everybody's just fucking everybody else, just kind of openly now, right?
It's more explicit.
What's interesting though is that even though humans have the use of reason, it's like we can decide when we've had enough of something. Yet oftentimes we'll overeat, we'll drink too much, have too much sex. Whereas animals, you could take a 1,000-pound grizzly bear, and as soon as he gets full, he stops. They have a natural temperance to them that we as humans have to really struggle to have.
It's
Well,
just
not all animals have that.
Yeah.
A wolf will gorge as much food as he can possibly eat physically because he's not sure when the next kill is.
Right.
But he won't hunt when he's not hungry.
Exactly. Whereas we'll eat when we're not hungry.
Survival strategy was for us for so long, it's now counterproductive since agriculture, so we have to kind of work against our own biological drives in a way. And when it comes to food, right? Because food is now so plentiful, and you don't have to hunt it. But that was the way that it worked for us for, 190,000 years. It worked just fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But now it's just another adaptation, and it takes 50,000 years for physical adaptations like that to really.
Yeah, we just hacked our brains because. Oh shoot.
Well, and what's interesting is the word boredom. That word wasn't even introduced to the English lexicon until around the industrial age. Because prior to that, you're out working all day in the fields and doing all that stuff. But once technology made things easier,
things are a lot different now. I think about it often whenever I drive by the gym or I go to the gym and I see 100 people in there just moving equipment around randomly. And if you were to put somebody on a time machine from 60,000 years ago and brought him to a gym, he'd be like, "What the fuck are you guys doing? Don't you have things to do?"
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it actually.
I know.
Didn't the author bring that up before also, where he's talking about if somebody was in the year 1000 AD and went 500 years in the future, it wouldn't be that different. But if you got someone from 1500 AD, put them 500 years in the future, they would think they were either in heaven or hell. It's that extreme of an advancement.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
The origin of Sapiens 70,000 years ago, man. That's not that long ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Industrial Revolution is just 150.
A lower class American living in the hood in Detroit where I grew up, they live better than emperors live just, 500 to 1,000 years ago.
Oh yeah, generally speaking, yeah.
Because life, and I hate to bring it all back to feminism, but that shows you even more how despicable it is, because when you see what women are trying to quote unquote get liberated from, like, oh, domestic life and being barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Oh, it's such an enslaved life. Do you realize how long it would take a woman to tend? You know how long it would take a woman to prepare a meal just 100 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it's like you see all this technology and all these hacks and all this easy stuff, and it's like they don't even want to do that. That's why they're all fat, and you know.
Well, that's an interesting place where this book comes in, because it describes essentially organizational structures, belief structures as more or less fictions empowered by the amount of people who invest in them, right? Like a corporation is only as powerful as the amount of people believing in the corporation and putting their labor into it. And same with a religion. And so the ability for like things that don't appear to match reality, like, you know, feminist ideology, is an outcome of everyone like losing faith in the structure of what we have, right? And so how I think a solution to that, at least in terms of mainstreaming like red pill thoughts, is how do we take, you know, pride in the accomplishments of civilization without it coming off as like this weird loving white people thing that it always turns into whenever Stefan Molyneux starts talking about it, right? Like that's the only way to defeat feminism, is to have pride for how America and Western civilization came together without it like this.
I don't think we'll ever see the defeat of feminism. It's going to destroy the West.
Oh yeah, not in our lifetime.
Or we can declare defeat and just be a small tribe and make nuclear bunkers or something. I don't know.
Well, I kind of like Jack Donovan's approach, you know, with his little tribe in the Cascadia. You know, he's got the crew of the people that you would rely on and define a perimeter, and then you defend the perimeter sort of thing. And it's like us versus them sort of thing, right? And that's just how, you know, that was one of the chords that struck me in the book too, is how it described how we've lived in an us versus them sort of scenario for such a long time, which is what Jack talks about in his 3 books too. And, you know, we have these globalists that try to impose generalized beliefs on the entire world and tell us, you know, certain things are true that serves a globalist agenda, but we've always been us versus them.
Oh yeah, factionalism is inherent to human nature.
I believe so. Yeah. You know, it's tribal. I mean, it's why the military figured out that when you create platoons and companies and all that sort of thing, like they operate ideally at a certain size, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even animals go in herds and birds go in flocks, and you know.
And it's why we need professional sports and college sports, so that we don't war against other states. We can proxy it through our.
Well, that's one of the things I think they were talking about in Sex at Dawn, that if primate tribes get too big, like chimpanzee or bonobo tribes, if they get too big, then they splinter off and they create new ones.
Or they'll kill each other.
Or they'll kill each other, right?
Well,
yeah, and that's what
killing each other. That's when they start needing masculinity in men, and you know, feminists are good at being feminists until there's an emergency. You know?
Yeah, until something needs fixing. Yeah.
I'm a little girl. Someone help me. You know what I mean? Like all of a sudden they're not quite.
There's no question that we all agree that feminism's toxic. I mean, I don't think we have anybody in our group that says, "Yeah, I'm a male feminist."
More like gender traitor.
Gender traitor. That's another way to put it. Matt, what's going on, man? I haven't seen you on one of these before. How you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. So sorry I got on a little late. I actually just found out my roommate had this book like 3 days ago. Mm-hmm. So I've only read about 25% of it.
What'd you think of it so far?
But I think it's fascinating so far. You know, the biggest thing really and it kind of goes along with what you guys are saying, is, you know, humans, like, we've been around for so long, at least compared to written history, you know, since the agricultural revolution. And I think a lot of times, and, you know, we talk about women a lot, like, you know, oh, well, you know, they don't want to work. They have things so convenient. But I mean, it's true for men too, and that we don't appreciate how good we have it in certain ways in modern society, and how long we didn't have it that way. You know, when women want to talk about the patriarchy or something, it's like they don't realize that, like, it's not about men like trying to just dominate everything. It's just like that's what worked. Like that's what got us through like all those crazy times where we had to survive as a species. And now we've built it up to a point to where we don't have all those struggles, right? Like we have a very insulated society now.
It almost seems like feminism and, you know, those that are the more left leaning are trying to stop masculinity. Like they're trying to turn men into a more feminized, gender neutral sort of being.
Right. Yeah, blank slate.
And they're trying to turn women into men. They're trying to absorb the sexes into each other.
Yeah, it's like they're trying to neuter them. Matt, I'm curious because I mean you've kind of moved down this different kind of path when it comes to your belief systems, you know, with like even like religion, like how did Sapiens kind of like kick into that area for you?
Yeah, well, you know, just in general, I'm just interested in figuring out how things work in the world, and I like to think I'm a pretty open-minded person. So if you would have talked to me a few years ago, I probably wouldn't have really liked Sapiens because I was like very like fundamentalist religious. You know, I grew up in a church where they thought like, you know, the world was created like 6,000 years ago and stuff.
That
so,
is
like,
a heavy cross to bear.
Yeah, so so this book would have like gone against a lot of those things. But yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, I think it's fascinating, and like I understand that we have to speculate a lot when it comes to things like evolutionary psychology. Like we're never going to know for sure exactly how things went, but I think we can think about it and get a decent idea.
It seems like there's an awful lot of breadcrumbs, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's a pretty obvious trail.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think, yeah, sure, we won't know for sure, but we do know some things, and we can figure out some other things and at least make a pretty good guess. And you know, we're never going to know everything, but we just need to do the best we can with what we have. So.
Oh, what's interesting too, like you mentioned about the blank slate, like just equalism and the egalitarian society. You know, I've been thinking about that recently. It's just like when someone wants to make this blank slate equalism, whether it's feminism or socialism or whatever, it's always the weaker of a social group that wants to do that, right? Like it's never like the dominant alpha person in charge that wants to go, you know what? We should all be equal. Like that's never how it goes, you know?
There are some examples.
Well, they might say that, but they say that so they can be
exactly, precisely.
Equal.
It self-reinforces their own position.
Yeah,
well,
and so
it's the exact same thing when there's so many like high IQ authors who write for Vox who need to deny the existence of IQ so that they deny their own privilege to get there, right?
Right, of course. So. Yeah, and so, but the interesting thing is like as soon as if they get what their wish is, like feminism is not about equalism at all. It's about a more submissive, if you want to say, beta in terms of social hierarchies, lower social hierarchies, replacing who's in the upper social hierarchies to lead and rule things. You know, when men are being, basically, have to placate to women, it puts women into a position of power and being in charge. They become the new alpha in that bonobo. Then you see the bonobo society where women are running the society. You see, so there always is this social hierarchy. People who claim they want equalism that's not really what they want. They want the people who they believe are in charge are oppressive. And so they want them to not be in charge anymore.
That's Brett Weinstein's argument when he says that.
Yeah. Well, that goes back actually to Nietzsche's argument about the origins of morality and how, particularly, for instance, Christianity is in a lot of ways, it's lower classes are the less well endowed in terms of natural gifts, kind of turning their necessity into a virtue. So because they can't conquer their betters, so to speak, through force of arms or through force of intellect, they create a moral system whereby, the blessed are the meek, blessed are the poor, et cetera, et cetera. And in doing so, they convince their betters of this, and they conquer them that way. And then you have a kind of a priestly class that's made up of people with these noble virtues that still spread this idea because it benefits them in terms of power. And that's why, in my opinion, like modern leftism, in a lot of ways, it resembles a religion, and it's got a very defined like priestly caste that says this is good, this is not good.
They all have blue check marks.
Yeah. Yes.
Well, and it just pointing to the book, though, it's real interesting that one thing I am in agreement is that these different things are created, they're illusionary or imaginary. So how we can apply that, though, as red-pilled men, is to not go with the social norms and illusions, to recognize the illusions for what they are, so we can live a life of fulfillment and happiness and being the best versions of ourselves.
Well, I think the thesis of this book argues that what you're saying isn't technically possible. And in fact, the thesis of this work is the same thing, in that we can try to be as close to like materially true in outcome, but none of our organization will ever succeed without a collectively shared myth or ideology or something that for all of history, the most successful ones have always been with the strongest or purest core principles. And even to the example of the manipulation of the priest class, like that was designed to prevent an uprising from the bottom because it kept the top from being too flaunting of their ability to sleep with everyone's wives, right?
Yeah.
So
and it made the poor think, oh, like we're poor, we're terrible now, but we will be in heaven. Like God favors us.
Yeah, it's always worthwhile to continue the fight, And if it takes God saying this is true to make that resonate, then it's more useful for that to be able to be spread as a message.
I have a question. Mm-hmm. Given that Sapiens really like to subscribe to similar ideas, we'll use money as the most recent example. What do you think it is that we're putting at the top of our beliefs and subscription list when it comes to today's world?
You mean like a common belief that we all share?
Yeah, like the most common belief that we all share.
I think I was just going to ask about that humanism is the most common religion right now.
Yeah,
I think Sapiens are now the authority over everything else instead of a god or animism or anything like that. It's humans are now the gods, so to speak, and we have the final authority in everything.
Humanity.
I think the challenge is too, though, is like we hold individualism in really high regard too. At least that's what I found with a lot of people I know, is they like to do like what's right for them or what they feel is right. And so I feel like we're getting away from like any sort of top-down common belief. And especially as people are like, less religious nowadays, going to church less and less. And as the world becomes more globalized, we see there's lots of different people with different belief systems. Like, I don't see what is the big common thing that can get us all aligned again? Because that really seems like
what it is.
Advantage.
I think it's government, man. I think it's government because if you go back 1,000 years, like there was no real significant form of government like we have today that is the head of the household. Like 1,000 years ago, you would protect your family. You would have to provide and provision.
Oh, yeah.
You were healthcare.
Absolutely.
Now we've got the state doing it all, right?
You were military. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe the belief is just, I think that the government will take care of me, or I think that the government has people's best interest in mind.
Well, the vast majority of people keep voting for dumbass government policies, right?
Well, what's interesting is you see a transfer in responsibility. Like as a believer, the thing that frustrates me the most is you see people expecting the state to take care of everybody the way the church is supposed to. Mm-hmm. And you see the church trying to take care of everybody the way the state is supposed to. It's like you got a bunch of these social justice warriors that, the church is rife with SJWs and feminists and stuff like that. And it's like the government, I don't know if that makes me a libertarian, but I just feel like the government is good for just mailing my envelopes and protecting me militarily. Other than that, what else are they good for?
Well, it's slavery. So I agree with the government comment, but it's people. They do this in studies. Most people actually want to be told what to do. Most people are avoiding pain rather than pursuing pleasure. Do you know what I mean? And so if they can be and kind of be status quo, then that is a level of happiness for them that they're okay with. And they're okay with being subjugated to a higher order or other people in charge. And so that's that part of this, the slavery aspect of it. So with it, a large amount of entitlement. You know what I mean? An entitlement of the, I owe this, I should have this from our government, our system. You know what I mean? Instead of being individualized and wanting to take care of things on your own. And it's actually, in my opinion, more or less, that's the illusion that people are getting on. So I think if you can break from that, you kind of can break free from that slavery and have a more of a fulfilling life.
Yeah, and if you think about it, that's what makes red pills that much more powerful, what you just said, Paul, because like I'm huge on words, man. Like words still matter to me. I break them down. They have meaning behind them. And if you get into the etymology of the word matrix, I mean, it comes from the same word family as mother, like matriarch,
squares, man.
right? Like matri. So it's like people that are still plugged into the matrix, they're still sucking on mom's nipples, and they don't, and it's a form of slavery because it's like to get off the nipple, you got to go through a lot of pain and growth, and you got to delay gratification. So to be unplugged is to, it really is growing up. Like,
yeah, they don't want you unplugged. They want you plugged into the government system.
Yeah, they do. And it's through violence. Like, understand,
you're a lot easier to control that way.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I'm not this crazy. Like, I'm not this. I know I live in Michigan and everything, where they got the Michigan militia types. But I mean, I'm not this, guy who's so anti-government or whatever. I think it's necessary evil, so to speak. But I do say evil in a sense that it is through violence that governments work. If I stop paying,
absolutely.
Yeah, eventually someone's pointing a gun at my face and saying you're going to give me that money. You know what I mean?
The U.S. is protected by guns, not gold.
Yeah.
And the problem with big governments is that, like, the government is like an insatiable beast that has an insatiable appetite that can never, once it gets a crumb, like back in 1913 when the income tax was first introduced, it was 1% of your income. Now it's what, 39, close to, well, Trump brought it down, but
it depends on your bracket.
All the taxes, man. It's like,
but at the same time, though, I think, if you don't provide people with and this is mostly the lower classes, but people with a certain standard of living, like they stop being invested in society, and then they are vulnerable to like communist propaganda, to extremist religious movements and stuff like that. Like, I
think it's a fair game.
Yeah, we talk about violence. Like, every government rests on implicit violence in both ends. Like, yes, I know if I don't pay my taxes, eventually somebody with a gun is going to show up at my door and demand that I give them something. But at the same time, every government knows that if enough people get sick of it, they will rise up, and the government won't be able to, impose its order on society anymore. There's implicit violence on both ends.
Even that's if what the government is like mastered so beautifully right now is they know how to tax you to the maximum. Mm-hmm. And then when they start picking up on signals of you losing your shit and protesting and burning down like the country, like they did in France with those yellow coats, the yellow vest guys, then that's when they start to peel back and they, placate society, right? Like they're always testing new boundaries. Like they're always finding new ways to pull in more of your money to use it to control you more.
Especially through inflation. That's the biggest tax that hits us all, and it's the invisible tax because we don't see it.
Yeah. And Bitcoin, by the way, solves that problem.
Absolutely.
Well, that's what's so funny about this. Oh, sure.
And speaking of Bitcoin, Richard, I think it was really fascinating what Amir talked about this morning about the whole concept of a city-state, because I think that's where our next ism is going to come from.
Yeah, that's what I would like to see.
Is the idea of like multiple different places that people could go, and wherever they like the best, they vote with their feet, they move there, they move their money, and that ism overcomes. And eventually we'll have enough of a shared history that, like, look, this ism really worked really well, and socialism fucking didn't. And we'll have finally enough proof, because God, I can't understand why people still think socialism works. More than a fifth of the humankind has tried socialism over 100 years, and we still have fuckers saying, "Oh, real socialism hasn't been tried." Yes, it fucking has, and it
That
doesn't work.
kills me too.
Failed every time.
The dickheads who say this are like liberal arts majors who can't do fucking algebra. But there were like really smart people who went to work every day in the Soviet Union and Maoist China, and it was their job to make socialism work, and they devoted their lives to this, and they couldn't do it. But these people are like, oh yeah, they had no idea what they were doing, but we know what's going on. Because I read the first volume of Capital, I know how socialism should be created.
Yeah, did you guys read any of Solzhenitsyn?
It's on my to-do list.
He's good.
He's
a great writer.
There's a tape version on YouTube somewhere with it's like 100 hours or something for the whole Gulag Archipelago. But gosh, some of the primary stories or first-hand stories are just insane. Just mothers.
But you know what's crazy? The socialist society that worked the best, and socialists hate to admit it, but if you look at it by the numbers, the one that worked the best was Stalin's Soviet Union. It had the highest economic output, and it increased the standard of living. And the only way that it did it, though, was through terror and through nationalist propaganda.
And stealing shit.
And fucking gulag. Like, you take every productive person and turn them into a slave.
Well, I mean, it wasn't like stealing because the state already had everything. Like, they had what was called Stakhovnite propaganda. There was a worker called Stakhov who supposedly increased his production by like 700% or something. And they put up like propaganda posters, and they're like, this guy did it for the fatherland. It was all nationalism, by the way. Like
oh yeah,
that country was incredibly nationalistic. And
can you guys hear me?
The terror itself was just random. Nobody knew when it was coming, who was going to hit.
Yeah, Jim.
And what people don't realize is that. Oh, I'm sorry. Was somebody going to go?
Yeah, I think Jim wanted to say something.
There's a book called Beware the Useful Idiots that basically lays out a roadmap for exactly what you guys are talking about. It's 100% accurate as far as how to create a social state. And if you read it, I mean, you guys will probably get chills about how much of that is the reality that we're in right now.
Yeah, and what I was going to say on the last thing we're talking about, what people don't realize is, you had the evil Axis versus the Allies, in World War II. And, Hitler gets a bad rap because he lost the war. But you got to realize the Russians and the Chinese, they were on the winning side. So the winners are the ones who get to rewrite history, not the losers. You compare Hitler's 6 to 12 millions to Stalin's, I think it was 20 million. Mao Zedong, I mean, we're talking 60 million with him. Way more brutal of a tyrant, way more of a socialist than even Stalin. Yet because he was on the winning side, he gets to rewrite history and make China the fall guy. Or I'm sorry, Germany.
Well, I'm sure everyone here thinks Stalin was a pretty as bad as Hitler type guy.
Oh yeah.
Worse. You know what's funny is that all these leftist types, they love to even if they say they don't like Stalin, they'll post memes and stuff about the Soviets beating the Nazis in World War II, and they're very proud of it. But like all the people that ran the Soviet Union, including Stalin, and all the people in the Red Army were extremely alpha. Like every one of the field marshals in the Soviet in the Red Army had at least what they would call campaign wife. She was just
it's like that in Eastern Europe and Russia today still, where there's not a lot of betas in society. It's a mostly alpha society.
Vladimir Putin, most alpha motherfucker on the planet.
That's probably true.
Yeah, and he was a Communist Party member. He was a high-ranking member in the KGB.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, Putin is what, 5'5", 5'6"?
Yeah, he's pretty short.
Didn't know that.
He's got the Tom Cruise thing going.
Yeah. You guys definitely check, if you're interested in Putin's rise, definitely check out a book called Nothing is True and Everything is Possible by Peter Pomerantsev. He was he was in the UK. His parents came from Russia, were expats, and he couldn't find a job in media, so he joined the Russian television system the moment that Putin's party started to take control of the media as their state propaganda. And so he just has stories from the inside of the insanity of Russian culture, and it kind of explains how our own culture war is kind of spinning out of control in the same way, and how Russian influence really just wants discord as opposed to any actual winner.
Well,
hey guys, I got a question. So I haven't finished reading the book yet. I'm curious about part 4 when it talks about the scientific revolution. Just one of the chapter titles is The Discovery of Ignorance, and then the last chapter is called The End of Homo Sapiens. So I'm wondering what you guys thought about the last chapter of the book, and what were some of the ideas in there.
Well,
because
the last chapter wasn't that conclusive. It was just kind of like, yeah, we've really fucked up things, and we'll probably keep fucking up things.
Okay, because it seems like the science, like the discovery of ignorance. Are they talking about how, like, with science, we realize a lot of the stuff we used to buy into isn't true? Is that
they talked about how the West dominated, really. How when the English and French would go into other countries, they weren't thinking they had all the answers and were just trying to take their resources. They were trying to also discover things and learn things as well. And it's that admittance of ignorance is what caused that enlightenment and that spreading and that domination of other cultures as well. So it's an interesting point, actually. I thought it was a really good one.
Yeah, the technological advancements of certain societies, like, has anybody ever been to Tulum?
To where?
No.
Tulum in Mexico. It's in the Yucatan, so it's just south of Playa del Carmen. There's a set of ruins that are on the ocean, and the ruins, like anything you'd see in Greece or Italy or Egypt. They're ancient ruins, and there was an ancient tribe of Mayans that lived at those ruins at the time when the Spanish conquistadors came to the Caribbean and Mexico, and there's like this total breakdown about how they documented these like weird godly things, beings that had created these ships with sails made out of wood and with all this technology like cannons and bows and arrows and stuff like that. Like they were just throwing sticks around, trying to kill things. So it's interesting how science, which is what he's talking about, Matt, in the book, how basically technology and science gave us such a huge advantage in all areas of life at all times. And that was just one example.
Okay. And the final chapter was saying, if we can fully map the genome, should we plan a different society based upon?
Yeah, like re-engineer the human race, or integrate like technology, like cyborg technology, right?
Like in the future, can we guarantee everyone has the same high IQ or something like that, right? To eliminate privilege,
or do you want to download your consciousness into a computer so when your body's dead that you continue to live on in a computer software system?
That shit. That's like we're taxing your children to keep your computer simulation running after you die. It's like no, just die and leave your inheritance and move on, please.
So Rollo actually posted on Twitter a story that was interesting. A scientist in China claims to have created the first bioengineered baby. He says he claims to have given these two girls a gene that makes them immune to the HIV virus. So if that's true, that's kind of an epoch-making event, because they will be the first genetically modified humans in existence.
Yeah, and what limits do we place on that, right?
Yeah,
Well, it almost seems like we have to go there because we're not able to replace the population at our current, reproductive rate. So, what is it? Life extension? Like, is that what they're going to do? They're going to engineer children that don't get HIV, flus, colds, chickenpox.
Or they create the next plague, and they've already put all their children immune to it, and just wipe out the rest of the world and take all the buildings that are still up.
Well, at that point, real estate will have no value because there'll be a lot more supply than people.
Well, there's more supply in China right now than they need. I think I watched a YouTube video this morning or yesterday morning. There are 50 million unoccupied apartments and condo style buildings in China right now.
Well, there's something about the Chinese culture where they like to buy up shit but not live in it. Like where I live in the Greater Toronto area, there's a lot of real estate that's vacant, which is primarily owned mostly by Chinese people.
Right, because it's a store of wealth, and the Chinese economy, the system and how they build their GDP is just constantly built. Oh, look, we're building something, GDP, Oh, it's torn down, trying to build another building. It's more GDP, and then just their GDP system and how they've been manipulating their gross domestic product for the last 50 years and building endless amounts of real estate in cities that are basically unoccupied is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, and also over there's a lot less security in that, like, the government might take your stuff at any time. So it's same with Russia. Actually, they like to hold assets in the West because they're a lot more secure.
Yeah, it makes sense. Guys, we got to widen down the broadcast. I got to hop off at 10:30. I got a call I got to do. But do you guys want to pick another book for round 2? How did this work out for y'all?
I loved it.
Great.
This is a great idea. I think we should definitely do another one.
This is like the dark side of
I
open.
had suggested Red Queen.
I have not read that. Has anybody not read that as well?
No.
I'd read it again for another meeting.
Interesting. Okay. Why don't we do this? Why don't we post some recommendations on the Facebook page, and then see what everybody picks on. We'll do like a poll.
I have a suggestion outside the books. Let's like come up with some questions to think about for the next book club, so we can like, what did you think about, and then question, and then we can all kind of like, as we're reading the book, think about that. Like maybe a generic question could be something like, how will this improve your life, or what was your biggest takeaway from the book, or something like that.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Well, that's how we opened the talk today. We actually started with what was your biggest takeaway?
Yeah, but it's always good to
maybe
have that
come up
kind
with
of
a template of questions for each book.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or something like 1 or 2 main points per chapter as we go throughout the month, just to keep bringing it up and thinking about it ahead of time.
Yeah.
There's definitely no shortage of ideas with the brain power on this panel. So I'm sure we'll be able to pull some stuff together. Cool.
For sure, guys.
All right.
Enjoy it,
let's kill it. And I will upload this. How do I end meeting? Yeah. Okay. So I'll kill it and I'll upload it to the channel and the page. We'll do like a poll. I'll try to do it first thing tomorrow morning and see if we can pick another book and then jump into something else new.
Is this one going to the private subscriber channel or the engineers and cars channel?
No, this is always private. So if I'm going to record something, it's only for the community.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm just anticipating my eventual doxing, but
it's only on the community, so you should be good.